The first thing he saw wasn't the girl. It was the sign tilted, splintered, nailed crooked into a scorched cottonwood tree. Each letter was carved not with hand, but with hatred. White man burns what he cannot own. The words bled. Not metaphorically. Someone had pressed flesh to that wood, fresh blood still pooled in its grain, drying like rust beneath a pitiless white sun. And then the air shifted. A scent. Not death, not yet, but something close, sweet, rotting, human. Samuel Nash dropped the reins. The tree's shadow leaned long across the sand, stretching like a crooked finger toward what dangled beneath its lowest branch. It wasn't a body. Not quite. She was still moving. Not in defiance, but in the weak, involuntary twitch of someone losing the fight to stay real. A girl. Apache. No more than 15, maybe. Barefoot. Her skin scorched red, her black hair clumped with dirt and blood. Both arms stretched up over the branch, bound at the wrists. Not hung by the neck. Her shoulders looked wrong, bones jutting from skin like trapped birds. Her feet didn't touch the ground, but they weren't far. She was being kept alive just enough to make dying last. It wasn't rope that held her. It was rawhide stripped, twisted, sun-hardened, Apache-made. But this wasn't Apache work. This was meant to mock. Behind her, nailed into the trunk, bones rattled, a makeshift wind chime made from finger joints, maybe rabbit paws or worse, copper wire strung through each, glinting like bloody veins in the sun. It clinked in the breeze, a lullaby played by demons. Samuel didn't move for a long time. His horse grunted behind him. Even it could sense the curse here. He scanned the sand, no footprints, no wagon tracks. Only windswept silence and the occasional hiss of a lizard moving through dry brush. Then the girl groaned, barely. Her lips were cracked, her face half swollen, blood crusted down one thigh, dried, dark. Not from a wound meant to kill, but from one meant to shame. Samuel stepped forward. The sign loomed beside her. The phrase carved in it wasn't just for show, it was a declaration, a warning. A memory someone wanted the desert to keep screaming. White man burns what he cannot own. It was more than words, it was a sentence. And suddenly Samuel knew this girl wasn't just some victim. She was bait, left here as a message, a punishment, a symbol. Something inside him cracked. Not loud, not fast, but like a hairline fracture through a life that had once known silence. He reached up slowly. Her wrists were bound so tight that rawhide had carved its way into flesh. Each movement made her arms shiver. Her head lolled forward like her neck had given up. Samuel didn't speak, not because he had nothing to say, but because anything he said now would feel like a sin. Instead, he pulled a knife from his belt. The rawhide didn't cut easily. It had dried into bone. When the last strand snapped, she fell. He caught her. She weighed almost nothing, a bundle of ribs and dried blood and heat. Her body twitched against his arms like she didn't believe she'd landed. Her eyes opened barely, then they didn't widen. They didn't blink, just locked onto his dark as gun oil. Bottomless, silent. Samuel exhaled. He pressed his canteen to her lips, but she didn't drink. She stared, as if trying to understand why someone had interrupted her sentence. Her fingers gripped something tight. He pried them open gently. A feather, long, charred at the edges, painted red at the tip. Not a decoration, a marker. He knew what it meant. A burned hawk, Apache symbol for something taken, broken, defiled. He swallowed hard. The sign, the feather, the bones, the rawhide, the heat. This wasn't punishment. This was ritual. He glanced once more at the sign nailed to the tree, then back to the girl in his arms. He'd seen war. He'd seen raids. He'd seen what settlers did when they wanted to scare others into silence. But this wasn't meant to scare. This was meant to erase. And yet, the girl still breathed, still clung to the feather, still didn't look away. In that moment, Samuel Nash knew one thing. If he'd left her here, He wouldn't just be a witness, he'd be complicit. The bones clinked behind him again, soft, steady, like a ticking clock. He lifted her fully into his arms and turned away from the tree. Each step back toward his horse felt like treason against the silence that had ruled his life for years. But he didn't stop. He placed her gently over the saddle, then climbed behind. As he took one final look back at the sign, the desert wind kicked up, lifting dust around it like a shroud. The hawk feather in her hand fluttered, caught a glint of sun, and then went still again. Not dead, not yet, and neither was he. As the horse begins to move forward, Samuel feels the feather brush against his hand, its heat lingering. He doesn't look back again, not even once, only forward, into the fire of the next silence. He rode slow, not because of the terrain, but because the weight behind him wasn't just human. It was history. It was war. It was a girl whose wrists still bled down his saddle blanket, whose silence pressed against his ribs harder than any bullet he'd ever taken. The wind kept following them. Same white sun, same clinking echo in his ears. Only now, no more bones, just the beat of hooves and the faint sound of her breath, ragged, fragile. He didn't ask her name. Names implied futures, and he wasn't sure either of them had one. His ranch lay 10 miles east down a ridge that swallowed the sun too early, leaving the ground always cold by nightfall. That's where he took her, past the dry wash, past the ghost of a burned church, past everything that once promised salvation and now only whispered loss. His cabin stood crooked in the shadow of old cottonwoods. No white picket fence, no porch swing, just stone, ash, and a rusted weather vane shaped like a dying crow. He carried her inside like she was made of glass, but she didn't flinch, didn't blink. She just watched, every corner and every nail, every shadow, as if memorizing how far she'd need to run. Samuel Nash set her down gently on the cot near the stove. The fire had long since burned out. He didn't light a new one right away. He needed silence first, to understand what this was. She lay on her side, knees curled. Her hands still trembled, even in sleep. Her hair, matted and dry, clung to her cheek like spider silk, one eye half open, unblinking. He knelt, untied the last strands of rawhide from her wrists. The skin underneath was angry, purple, peeled back to tender pinks. Her fingers twitched, but she didn't pull away. He rinsed a rag in water and pressed it against her arm, slowly, gently. That's when she made a sound, not a scream, not a word, just a hiss, like air escaping a broken jar. He froze, but her face didn't twist. Her mouth didn't open, and it was almost as if the sound had come from somewhere else entirely. He spoke, finally, quiet, low. "You're safe now." But the words felt false in his own mouth. Safe was a lie spoken by men who wanted something. Still, he said it again, just softer. "You're safe." She blinked once, that was all. He cleaned her wounds. Some were older than others, jagged lines that ran down her leg, burns along her ribs and bite marks on her shoulder that hadn't broken skin but had meant to. His hands shook, but she never moved. Only once did she react when he reached for her foot to wrap a cracked toe in cloth. She jerked, not violently, and just as if she'd remembered it was hers. So he sat back and let her breathe. He made soup, cornmeal boiled thin. No spice, just heat. She didn't eat, but when he set it beside her, she didn't look away from the bowl either. Later, as dusk folded the hills into shadow, he opened the window. Let air in. Let the dust escape. But something remained in the room, the scent of blood, smoke, and girl. A girl who hadn't cried once. Outside, the horse still stood tied to the fence, waiting, watching. Like him, that night, he stayed awake in the rocker by the stove, his rifle across his lap, just in case whoever left her there came looking for the silence they'd lost. He didn't sleep, but sometime before dawn, she did. Her hand opened in sleep. The feather slipped free from her grip, landed softly on the floorboards. Charred tip, red paint, the mark of a hawk caught in fire. Samuel picked it up, turned it in his fingers. It was stiff, smelled like smoke. He didn't know much Apache, but he remembered one word, Gozu, peace. He doubted that word had lived in her world for a long, long time. He laid the feather beside her, where her fingers might find it when she woke, then sat back down, watched her chest rise, fall, rise again, and in that rhythm for the first time in years, he felt something old stir behind his ribs, and not pity, not even guilt, but a need, not to fix her, not to save her, just to be the man who didn't ride past. As dawn light creeps through the cracks in the cabin wall, it lands gently across her face. She doesn't wake, but her hand reaches slowly, blindly, and finds the feather again. Samuel sees it and says nothing, but the corner of his mouth just faintly shifts. Not a smile, a vow. The first morning, she didn't speak. The second, she didn't move. By the third, he started speaking for both of them. Not in questions, she owed him no answers. Just small truths, quiet as rain on tin. This kettle's older than me. Sheep won't come near the canyon this time of year. That ridge over there used to be called Widow's Brow. She never looked at him, but she never looked away, either. She just watched everything. The corner of the stove where the heat lingered, the threadbare blanket with the patch shaped like a tear, the way his hands cracked when he poured water. Each morning, he laid the feather by her bowl of broth. Each night, it ended up under her fingers again. She never held it, never used it, but she never let it go. Her breathing came in shallow gasps, like each inhale cost her a piece of something she didn't want to give. When she coughed, it sounded like glass shattering in a faraway room. He kept her warm, a soft fire, layers of old coats draped like offerings. He kept the door shut against the wind. The only thing he couldn't keep out was memory. One night, she reached for a cup. Her fingers brushed the handle and froze. Then she pulled her hand back fast, like she'd touched flame. He didn't ask, just slid the cup closer and stepped away. He learned to leave things halfway. Bandages, water, clean rags. Never gave them, only offered. Like you might feed a coyote nursing wounds under your porch. If she took them, she took them. If not, he didn't push. One evening, he found her standing. Not fully, just on one leg braced against the table. Her other leg, still wrapped tight in cloth, trembled under her weight. But she was trying. He didn't speak, didn't cheer, didn't move, just let her fall when she fell, and when she tried again. He turned his back quietly, giving her the dignity to fail in peace. She made it 3 steps before her knees gave. He caught her, but not all the way. Let her keep just enough weight to pretend it was hers. That night, something changed. She sat at the edge of the bed instead of curling up in it. She drank the broth. She didn't say thank you. But when he handed her a fresh strip of cloth to rewrap her wrists, she didn't flinch at the touch. She let him clean the lines where rawhide had kissed bone. She didn't cry, but her breathing steadied. That was all he needed. Each evening, he carved, not out of habit, out of grief. Or maybe memory. Wooden slats, each one cut clean, then notched with symbols. A spiral, a star, a crescent moon, things he didn't fully understand but remembered from her people. He left them on the sill. The next day they were gone. No questions, no explanation, but later, she placed one back. A spiral, painted red. It sat there for days, bleeding into the sunlight. A week later, she spoke. One word, fire. He froze, turned. She didn't repeat it, didn't explain, just looked at him. That one word hanging between them like smoke. Fire, he said back, not a question. A confirmation, so she nodded once, just once, and went back to staring at the wood slat in her hand. The next morning, he caught her staring at the window. Outside, a hawk circled low, slow, Not hunting, just gliding. He watched her watch it, then saw her lips move, not a word, just a breath shaped like something lost. That night, he didn't carve. He sat beside her instead. They said nothing, but the room didn't feel empty. It felt held, like silence could be an offering too. He watched her fall asleep upright, head leaning just slightly toward his shoulder, and not touching, just closer than before. And when she stirred, fingers twitching against dreams, he whispered one word, "Still here." In the silence of the dark cabin, the fire burns low. The hawk feather rests in her hand again. This time, she clutches it, tighter than before. Outside, the wind knocks gently against the shutter, but inside, her breathing softens. No longer glass, just breath, just alive. It was the chime that woke her, not the one by the stove, not the normal sound of wind slipping through timber. This was different, hollow, tinkling, familiar in a way that made her freeze mid-breath. Samuel had hung it days ago, fashioned from bent nails and bits of scrap tin, a soft, harmless thing. But in the gray haze of morning, its sound reminded her of the one behind the tree bones and copper, clinking like teeth in a dying mouth. She sat up too fast. The blanket fell. Her chest rose sharp. Then she saw him. Not close, not reaching. Just by the window, sharpening a broken blade with slow, even strokes. His eyes met hers for a moment, then dropped. That's how he always did it. He never stared, never studied, just looked enough to see if she needed something. And in that glance, something flickered recognition. She rose to her feet, limped toward the door. He didn't stop her, just followed. Outside, the world looked like it had been forgotten overnight. Pale sky, dust that no longer danced, sagebrush stiff with cold. And in the distance, a hawk again, this time perched on a fence post, wings tight against the wind. She approached it slowly. It didn't flee. Instead, it tilted its head curious. She stopped 10 feet away and whispered something in Apache. Samuel couldn't catch the words, but he saw her lips shape them like a prayer. Then she turned and pointed not at the hawk, at the post it sat on. It was old, weather-warped, but on its surface, a mark, not carved, painted. A hawk, crimson-tipped wings, flames beneath its talons. He hadn't painted it. She had. Some night, when he was sleeping, she limped forward, pressed her fingers to it, and whispered again. Then finally, she looked at him and spoke. "I saw my village burn from inside a cage, and he didn't respond." She took another step. "They took me, put me in a wagon with girls from other fires, and white girls too. Some cried, some begged." She raised her hand, showed a ring of burns around one wrist, faint, old. "They branded us, said we were claimed. Then they painted the hawk." Samuel's voice came low, uncertain. "Why?" "The hawk." She looked back at the bird on the post. "In our stories, hawk sees all, brings messages to the dead. But they burned its wings to make it stay." He understood now. That sign in the desert, that feather in her hand, it wasn't hers. It was what they made her carry. She stepped toward him. "They told me I'd belong after the third burn, but I didn't. I just stopped screaming." He wanted to say something, anything, but what could a man born from the other side of the fire offer? She saved him the burden. "They left me there 'cause I bit a man's tongue off." Her eyes stayed steady, and he called me Ember. Said I was warm but would never be fire. Said he'd teach me. She paused, looked down at her fingers. I taught him instead. Silence. Even the wind held its breath. Then a sound, her laugh. Dry, short, not happy, but real. Samuel felt the sound crack something open in him. She sat on the porch rail, pulled her leg up beneath her like she used to. No shame now, no fear, just a girl reclaiming her body one joint at a time. She looked at him again. "What did they burn in you?" The question hit harder than any bullet. He didn't answer. Just looked past her at the field where nothing grew anymore, at the scar along the tree where he buried his brother's boots, at the rusted rifle nailed above the door, still stained with guilt. She nodded like she saw all of it without him saying a word. "Fire lives here," she whispered, placing her hand on her chest. "But I'm still choosing where it burns next." That night, she kneels by the fireplace, slowly painting another hawk into the ash with her fingertip. Samuel watches, unmoving. This time, the wings aren't curled. They stretch wide, no flames, just flight. He doesn't speak, but as he kneels beside her, his hand mirrors hers, tracing the same wing. The snow came without warning. Not a storm. Just a quiet dusting flake swirling in the wind like ash returning to earth. The kind of cold that didn't announce itself but crept into your bones when you weren't looking. She stepped outside barefoot. Samuel saw her from the window, arms folded, face turned to the sky, eyes closed as the snow melted on her lashes. He didn't call out. He just stood there, watching her be alive. She'd begun to speak more. Not in sentences, not in stories, just small declarations. "The hawk didn't come back today. That horse favors its left leg. You smell like smoke even when the fire's out." He'd nod. Sometimes he'd reply. Sometimes he wouldn't. Words weren't the most honest thing between them. Gestures were. Like how she always filled the water pail before he could. Or how she laid her blanket beside the door each night, not near him, but near enough to hear him breathe. Once, he returned from chopping wood and found a hawk feather tied to his coat button. Not his. One she'd kept hidden. No ceremony, no explanation. Just tied there. Soft, simple. He didn't take it off. In the evenings, she would sit on the step and hum low, broken melodies from a language he would never understand. He never asked her to stop. He never asked her anything. That was the difference. He didn't ask. He offered. One night, he cooked rabbit stew, set 2 bowls on the table instead of leaving hers by the bed. She didn't come at first, just stared at it from across the room. But then wordless, barefoot, quiet she sat. They didn't speak. They ate. Halfway through the meal, her hand brushed his when they both reached for salt. He froze. She didn't. She just let her hand rest against his for one breath longer than necessary, then pulled away. He said nothing, but that touch echoed for hours. Later, he found her tending to the horses. She stood close to the smallest one, brushing its mane with a gentleness that didn't match her scars. The animal leaned into her, trusting. Samuel leaned against the fence. "She likes you," he said. The girl turned. "She doesn't ask where I came from," she said softly. He lowered his gaze. "She doesn't need to." A silence stretched between them, not awkward, just honest. Then she said, "You don't ask either." He met her eyes, dark, wide, still holding storms. "I see enough," he said. She stepped closer, held out her palm, a small wooden hawk carved by her, smoothed by her hands, wings spread, no paint, no burn marks, just open. He took it, held it like it might break. She tilted her head, still afraid of fire. He answered too fast. "Yeah," but then added slower, "less than I used to be." That night, they sat near the fire together. Not side by side, not touching, but close enough that their shadows merged on the wall behind them. The hawk rested between them on the floor. She reached out first. Fingers brushed his again. This time, neither pulled away. Her hand was calloused. His was cracked. But between them, the warmth was soft. She didn't ask. He didn't speak. They just let the silence say what words never could. That they had both burned, but had not turned to ash. That they had no permission. But still love had grown. As the fire dies down, the carved hawk remains between them. She leans forward, blows out the last ember. For a moment there is no flame, just darkness. But neither moves. And when the first flicker of dawn touches the window, their hands are still linked in sleep. The knock came just after sunrise. Not loud, not frantic. Just 3 slow raps against the cabin door. Samuel was already awake. He'd known they'd come. Knew it the moment he found tracks 2 days back, fresh boot prints by the creek, spaced wrong for cow hands, too straight for travelers. She knew too, that morning. She braided her hair for the first time since the tree, tied it back with the same rawhide that once held her wrists, her way of saying, I know, I remember. But I'm not afraid. Samuel opened the door. 3 men, 2 in uniform, 1 in a wide-brimmed hat too clean for someone who actually rode Bureau of Indian Affairs. The man in the hat spoke first. We're looking for property. Samuel didn't answer. Hatman cleared his throat. Girl, half-blood, escaped from a church-run holding camp down in Las Cruces. Violent tendencies. History of inciting unrest. Another man read from a paper, Jane Doe, claimed by the St. Mercy Reclamation School for Indian Girls. The words landed heavy, meant to bruise. Behind Samuel, she stood in the doorway, arms folded, face still. Hatman nodded toward her. That's her. Samuel's voice came out low. Steady. Her name's not Jane. One of the soldiers stepped forward. We got rights, mister. That one there belongs to the government. Samuel didn't move. She's not property. Hatman smiled, the kind of smile that grows in dark corners of a courthouse. She's a ward, unclaimed, dangerous. You aiding her makes you guilty of obstruction. Might cost you your land or your life. From behind, the girl spoke calm, cold. I've already paid. The soldiers shifted. She stepped forward slow, deliberate until she stood beside Samuel. Not behind, not hidden. Beside, Hatman looked her over like a butcher picking meat. You've forgotten your place. She raised her chin. No, I learned it, then added, in Apache fire doesn't bow. Hatman's jaw twitched. Final warning. Step aside. Samuel didn't. Instead, he stepped in front of her, hands at his sides. No rifle, no blade, just a man made of refusal. I burned my barn for her. They blinked. He continued. Last winter, men like you came through, said they'd offer safety for a girl with no papers. Took my neighbor's daughter, never came back. He glanced back at her. She lives here now. The air between them tightened. One of the soldiers reached for his weapon. Samuel moved faster, not to draw, but to speak, louder than before. You want to drag her back to chains, you'll have to burn this whole mountain, but I warn you, he pointed to her. She don't burn easy. A pause. Hatman considered it, considered them, then spat. Filthy sympathizer. He turned, didn't order the men forward, didn't shoot, just walked. The soldiers followed. No fight, no bullets. But not peace either. She exhaled when the last hat disappeared into the trees. Her legs buckled. Samuel caught her. Not like before, this time. She leaned into him. Heavy, whole, real. That night, he rebuilt the fire. The hawk carving sat in the center of the mantle now. She added paint-red wings stretched high. He sat beside her. You scared, she nodded. So am I. She smiled then. Not soft, but strong. Then whispered, but I'd rather be fire than ash. Later, as they lie on the cabin floor staring at the ceiling, the wind howls outside. She listens for the chime, but it's gone. Burned with the barn. Silence now. Real silence. She turns to him, eyes wide. He doesn't ask. He just reaches out, takes her hand. Neither let go. Spring came slow, not with flowers or songs, but with permission. The kind earned, not given. Frost still clung to the roots. Snow still curled at the edge of the ridge. But when the wind blew, it didn't carry ash anymore. It carried wood smoke. And peace. The cabin had changed. A new door, carved by hand. A feather tucked above the threshold. A wooden sign nailed beside the entry. In letters shaped with care, she lives here now. Samuel carved it one morning before she woke. He didn't ask if it was what she wanted. But when she stepped outside and saw it, she didn't say a word. She just ran her fingers over the grain, then leaned her head against the wood. And breathed. No more blankets on the floor. Now they shared one bed, not out of duty, not out of need, but choice. At night, she whispered stories, not the ones she'd been told. The ones she chose to remember, Stories of a girl who ran with hawks before the world tried to cage her. Of trees that listened. Of feathers that never burned. No matter how many hands tried, Samuel never interrupted. He just let her voice fill the room like sacred smoke. He'd built her a workbench by the window. There, she carved little figures, animals, shapes only she could name. Sometimes he caught her humming. One morning, she placed a new hawk above the fireplace, not painted red. This one, golden, wings open, eyes clear. Fire below it not engulfing it, but lifting it. This one, she said, doesn't run. He nodded. I know. That afternoon, they rode together. She sat tall in the saddle now. No more flinches, no more binds around her wrists. The sun hit her face and didn't make her wince. They crossed the ridge where he'd found her. The tree was still there, but the sign was gone. So were the bones. Only a bare branch remained bent, scarred, but still reaching skyward. She stopped her horse, dismounted, stood beneath that cottonwood in silence, then pulled something from her satchel, a small wind chime, made of wood, painted symbols on each piece, spiral, flame, wing. She hung it where the old one had been. It didn't rattle. It sang, soft, honest, not a warning, not a curse, a promise. Samuel stepped beside her. She reached up, laced her fingers into his. He didn't speak. She didn't look away. The wind moved between them clean, gentle. And in that breath of silence, she said, Here. The hawk sleeps without fear. He swallowed hard. You sure you want to stay? She smiled. I'm not staying. He blinked. She looked up at the tree again. I'm beginning so. They rode home slow. No urgency, no dread, just two people who had been many things, slaves, stranger, savior, ghost, and now simply alive. That night, under stars too bright to belong to any nation, they lay together on the cabin porch. No fire needed. She rested her head against his chest. He traced lazy circles on her arm. The hawk carving above them watched. And when the wind came, it didn't scream. It whispered. Words not in English, not in Apache, just truth. And sleep came without chains. In the middle of the night, she wakes from a dream but doesn't startle, doesn't cry. She listens to his heartbeat, then slowly rises and tucks the golden hawk into the windowsill. Just before dawn, the first light strikes its wing. It glows. Some fires don't leave ashes. They leave roots. This story isn't about rescue, it's about recognition, about what happens when we stop trying to fix broken people and start witnessing them. When we offer hands not to drag them from pain, but to stand beside it, in a world that burns what it cannot understand, whether through violence, silence, or fear. Choosing to stay is a radical act. Staying when it's hard, when it's quiet, when healing looks more like waiting than doing. The hawk in her story never begged to be free, it simply refused to be owned. We often think survival means running, but sometimes survival means returning to the place of pain, to the thing we fear, and turning it slowly, stubbornly into a home. If you've ever felt scorched by the world, know this. You are not ash. You are not what they tried to name you. You are fire tempered by wind. You are roots growing in burned soil. And you are allowed to begin again without fear. Just like she did. Just like you still can.